This cheap SATA solid-state drive has a feature I haven't noticed before. It has a little light on it. However, it's only for power. It doesn't blink according to drive activity. You might have heard of a project called Windows 98 QuickInstall, which is designed to make installation of that old OS easier. And apparently it can magic up drivers for computers made 25 years after that OS was released. So it's definitely an interesting project. Obviously, installing such an old OS on modern hardware is just a cool party trick. The only drivers it could ever hope to have are the bare essentials just to get it to start up. If it starts up, as we'll see later. But let's not run before we can walk, and let's start with the computer that could run this OS normally. This 2001 Acer TravelMate laptop, which is designed for Windows ME or 98. So it's perfect for installing one of those OSs. I've already made a few videos about this computer. But we'll add a twist anyway. Instead of installing to the internal hard drive, we're going to install it to a USB drive. Specifically, this USB SSD, which is just an internal SATA SSD with a USB adapter. And we're going to install it from a USB flash drive. By the way, when you hear USB and you only think of these, that's not correct. This part is the USB, so this is USB as well. And this better work because this computer only has 2 USB ports. By saying this I've jinxed it, haven't I? And they're USB 1.1, so it's gonna be much slower than newer computers. Will this 25-year-old computer even be able to boot from USB though? Of course not. So I set up the Plop boot manager on a floppy disk. And we're gonna boot from that and select the USB option. I know the screen is a bit dusty. I'll clean it off in a moment. And there's Plop boot manager booting up from the floppy disk. Now we can select USB. Since both the flash drive and the SSD are USB, only the flash drive is plugged in right now. And there we go. There's the Windows 98 or Windows 9X Quick Install boot menu. Now we can eject the floppy, plug in the USB SSD, and boot the installer. And here it is. We've got 3 options. Each option has its pros and cons, but since this computer is designed for Windows ME, and I'm pretty sure no one picks that option, I'm gonna pick it. There's the part about working on the most modern hardware. AMD Ryzen 9000, 32 gigabytes of memory, PCIe storage, such as NVMe SSDs. Well, now we're going to try it on a USB SSD on period-appropriate hardware. First, we have to partition the drive. Second option. This installer runs on some lightweight Linux distribution. That's why it can run on both old and new computers. So we'll select it. And there's already a FAT32 partition there, but we're going to delete it, make a new one. I'm going to take out 200 megabytes from it. Just as over provisioning, primary of course, then write the changes. And now we can quit. And begin the installation with the first option. We choose the partition of the external SSD. Of course we want to format it, set it as active, all that good stuff. We'll also copy the extra stuff. Of course we don't need to patch for modern CPUs. We're not using a hard drive larger than 2 terabytes, and we don't need UEFI support yet. So let's begin. I see that the computer is not showing any drive activity, so it should be doing stuff on the USB drive and not the internal one, as it should. But even though the internal IE of this computer isn't lightning fast, it might be a bit faster than USB 1.1, so we need to wait for a while. That took nearly half an hour. Never doing this over USB 1.1 again. But anyway, this part worked. Let's unplug the USB flash drive leaving only the USB SSD plugged in, and boot to it. See what happens. Oh, and of course we have to reinsert the floppy disk. I'll pick it up later. Uh-oh, and of course something had to go wrong. So I decided to try Windows 98, just in case this is just a problem with that controversial OS. Actually, I forgot one important limitation of the Plop Boot Manager. Its USB support is read-only. That's of course fine for an installer, but not for an installed OS, which can't start up on a read-only file system. However, I did try QuickInstall on the internal hard drive of this computer, and while I still had to install some drivers manually, it works just as expected. Much faster too. Let's move on to less appropriate hardware now. Way too new for Windows 98, but still older than what's mentioned in the intro screen. I'm gonna try my underpowered HP 255 laptop, which has a CPU barely faster than a 2001 computer. So while Windows 98 or ME would still run poorly due to no drivers, it might actually be the only OS that would run fast on this CPU, assuming it boots up. There's another reason why I've chosen this computer for this experiment: EFI support. After doing some videos on how legacy BIOS mode is important for Windows 10 and 11 on some models of Mac, now we're gonna try Windows 98 in EFI mode. What could go right? It's possible thanks to an EFI program called CSMWrap, designed for extremely new computers that do not have legacy support. This one does, but we're gonna ignore it. What's gonna happen when we boot up Windows 98 on an external SSD in EFI mode? How anachronistic is that? So here's the setup on this HP 255. Both appear in this computer's boot menu, but the flash drive doesn't appear in new UEFI mode. It does have CSMWrap included, but you have to choose it separately with the boot from EFI file option. However, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's start the installation in legacy mode. Windows 98 and EFI mode just don't fit together, but according to this installer, they can. So just for kicks, let's try Windows ME again. But this time, we will enable the option for UEFI. Oh, is it a highly experimental feature? You don't say. And this is how quick it's supposed to be. Now let's reboot. Go to the boot menu again. And now the external SSD appears in UEFI mode. Let's see what happens when we pick it. It's starting CSMWrap. We don't see the Windows 98 boot screen. I'm guessing because EGA graphics doesn't work here. But let's see if we get anything. I think it's safe to assume it doesn't work. I'm not sure if it's stuck at the boot screen or maybe it's trying to show an error, but it's not showing anything. Let's try starting it in legacy mode. Oh, something's wrong here. The CMOS checksum is invalid. The CMOS will be reset to the default configuration and will be rebooted. So yeah, for some reason, CSMWrap resets all the BIOS settings. I've tried this before and it already happened, but now that I've caught it on video, I'm not gonna try it again. It didn't reset the time and date, but it did reset all the settings, which are only a couple I want to adjust. Mostly the boot menu. I prefer the OS boot manager to be the last option, so it boots from an optical disk or a USB drive first. There we go. Anyway, let's try Windows 98 from the USB drive in proper legacy mode. And there's the Windows ME boot screen. I forgot it was ME and not 98. So out of place here, don't you think? Oh, cannot find or load required file, kernel 386.exe. Access to the file was denied. Wasn't this the same error we got on the period appropriate computer? I'll try 98 off camera quickly. And I tried it before, but it was stuck on a blank screen. Let's try again. Again, super out of place. But look at this. It's actually started up the graphical user interface. So I'm not going to try ME again. We'll see how far we get. Windows 98 on this Windows 8 era computer, running from a USB drive. Obviously it's busy right now, but even this phase seems slow. That's how underpowered this 1.0 GHz CPU is. And 1 GHz isn't bad for Windows 98. And it's trying to install a driver, but a file is missing. There's no browse option. Maybe it's in the drivers folder. Nope. What about the extended drivers? Those directories, drivers and driver.ex, are created by Windows 98 QuickInstall. But it seems that driver isn't there. Skip file. More errors? For what you expect. So it actually found a driver for this computer. Looked like network. Even though it couldn't install it. Yeah, restart once again. And there's the desktop. Unbelievable. Windows 98 running natively on this circa 2014 computer. With 4 gigs of RAM, by the way. And I really appreciate Twitter mentioned correctly. No drivers, of course, but that's what QuickInstall is about. Just getting it to run. And that's it. The Universal Video Driver VBEMP from bare Windows is included, which would allow you to set the right display resolution and color depth. But of course it's no replacement for a proper video driver, because it has no graphics acceleration. It's similar to the standard or basic Microsoft driver on Windows XP and newer. Let's make sure shutdown works. You can't take it for granted in these OSs. It shows this, but it doesn't automatically turn off. You just press the power button quickly here, and it should turn off. Next is the Valve Steam Deck, which I've shown on one video before. I bought this computer just because it was on sale, and I thought I'd use it to play more video games, but I've been using it more for web browsing and video editing. The last few videos I've uploaded to my channel, including this one, are all edited on this machine, using an external monitor and keyboard and mouse, of course. But because I don't want to erase the internal NVMe SSD, and I want to try this crazy Windows 98 project, I'm going to try connecting that SSD to it and see if it boots up. However, the Steam Deck does not have legacy mode. We have to rely on CSM wrap. And because it doesn't matter where you do the install, I'm going to do it on the HP 255, and after that connect it right to the Steam Deck. By the way, on the Steam Deck, I don't see an option for that 4G decoding or resizable BAR or smart access memory. There's an option to change the frame buffer size, but that's static. So I think the default settings are okay. So here's this setup. I have the USB drive connected to a USB Type-C dock. Let's start up to the boot menu. And the USB device appears. Will it work with CSM wrap? We're about to find out. The screen is sideways. That's normal for the Steam Deck. If you install anything that isn't the original SteamOS, you have to go to the OS settings and set the screen orientation to landscape, but of course we can't do that here. It does look normal if you connect an external monitor, but we're not doing that here. I'll just rotate the video for you. Now it's booting from that disk, and once again it seems stuck. I tried it both with and without that CPU patch. But that was Windows ME. What about 98? Well, it goes further, but then it says there is insufficient memory, even though the problem is the opposite, too much memory. There are system file edits you could do, but apparently you don't need them on QuickInstall. They're all applied for you. Otherwise it wouldn't have booted up on the HP laptop, which had 4 gigs of RAM. Everything over 1 gig is a problem for Windows 9X versions. Back then you'd be lucky to see a computer with more than half a gig. I have just one trick up my sleeve. The system file responsible for managing memory on MS-DOS-based operating systems is himem.sys. There are some newer alternatives, for example XMGR. So we can take XMGR, put it in the Windows folder, and rename it to himem.sys. Will this go any further? It does, but it still doesn't start up. And it pains me to say that I've run out of options, at least for now. Maybe someone cleverer than me can figure out a solution and do their own video about Windows 98 on the Steam Deck. But I know it'll end up just like Windows 98 on the HP 255. A cool trick, but not useful for anything. For now, I hope you've enjoyed my attempts. Thank you for watching.